Hey, what's going on, everyone? How you guys doing today? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is Rebuck Theater, and I will openly, publicly admit, I really liked Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. I'm seeing it again in IMAX in a couple days, and I am super excited to see on the big screen in that particular format. That being said, there's been this odd situation of brewing, and I think it's kind of a weird thing in regards to Palpatine's return. A lot of people out there didn't like it. A lot of people out there did. I'm one of the people that actually did, even though I'm not entirely on board with how they did it. I think they could have done it other ways that would have been cooler and more in tune with the lore, at least from the EU. That being said, there was this narrative about JJ Abrams having been the person to come up with that idea, but now we're hearing that it's really Kathleen Kennedy. Kind of seems like a weird Hail Mary this late in the game to assign credit to this particular story point. Maybe they're looking at the response to Palpatine overall, and they're seeing that it's a positive one, and they're going like, well, we need to give Kathy some good points, some good PR points with people. We might as well do something like this and make the claim. I don't know if that's the case, but that's kind of what it feels like to me. So saying here that Star Wars Palpatine's return and Rise of Skywalker was apparently Kathleen Kennedy's idea, saying that she had a clear plan for the ending. Now we know there was no plan from really the beginning that was followed through on. We know that, according to Kathy, there was a white room where they plotted out the story elements of the trilogy, and then that kind of went, threw it away when Rian Johnson came on board, and Colin Trevorrow had trouble picking it up, and I'm going to talk about that here in a couple minutes. But saying she had a clear plan feels a little bit off. Anyway, so Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, which is currently pushing towards a $700 million global haul, it's actually at 725 right now, brought back the Skywalker saga villain, Emperor Palpatine, for the story's endgame, pitting him and his Final Order fleet against Rey and the Resistance. Though Colin Trevorrow, who was originally tapped to helm Episode 8 and directed, or had credited JJ Abrams for having the idea to bring back Emperor for the conclusion, says, or Chris Terrio had said, or seems to shift the narrative a bit. It's not necessarily the best written article. Now, in it, Terrio possibly credits Kathleen Kennedy for wanting to bring back Palpatine, saying Kathy and senior VP Michelle Rejwan had a clear plan for where they wanted things to end. They had clear plans about certain narrative marks they wanted us to hit. They also gave us a lot of freedom within that. We knew that Rey and Ren were utterly the key to the trilogy. We also felt that there was no way that we were going to not find a path to redemption for Kylo Ren, the son of Han and Leia. I think it's kind of weird that he has to come out and say it like that. Like, oh no, we were going to get a redemption arc for Han, for Kylo, the son of Leia and Han. That hasn't been established now for well over 4 years and everything else. So let's have that explainer involved in there. Again, it kind of feels a little bit weird here, but if I recall correctly, wasn't Michelle Rejwan brought in late into the game? She was brought in late into the development, or she was always kind of on board with the Rise of Skywalker. She worked with Bad Robot, but then late into the post-production cycle, she was then bumped up to senior VP of live action projects over at Lucasfilm. So that's something that happened only a few months ago. So it's not like she was that heavily involved, I think, from perhaps, I don't know. I mean, I feel like they're propping people up here. They're trying to prop it up maybe to kind of like reaffirm faith. It's a very weird article. It's a very weird thing to say. Then he goes on to say here, that's when we started aggressively pursuing the idea that there is this old evil that didn't die. The source of that evil in the galaxy, and this dark spirit waiting for its revenge and biding its time. The entity known as Palpatine in this version, his body died in Return of the Jedi, is patient and has been waiting. He dug his foxhole and has been waiting for his chance to reestablish his total domination. And that is exactly why I thought it was really cool. I enjoyed the fact that they were able to find a way to show that evil doesn't truly die. It just gets knocked down, which is ultimately the point of the Chosen One prophecy. So the way you have to look at that, and this is just kind of like a history explainer, is that there's a lot of philosophy in Star Wars. There's a yin and a yang theory, the approach to that, right? The light and the dark. And so generally speaking, it's like Anakin's job wasn't to destroy the dark. It was just to destroy the Sith enough to knock it back down so the Sith couldn't go and overtake the light. The light wants to maintain balance. The dark wants to take over and usurp. And that was Anakin's entire arc. But Palpatine, being as evil and bad as he was, only got knocked down for 30 years and then found his way back, being able to amass a whole new fleet. Now, again, I would have really preferred there to be a whole heap of other exposition that I think might exist in some alternate cut of the movie. There's been talks of like people wanting an extended cut, but I think it's interesting at this point where Kathleen Kennedy is getting the praise for this, right? Oh, it was really Kathy's idea for the end game. It really wasn't. I think anyone who has followed this long enough knows specifically that it wasn't Kathy. Now says, when asked if Palpatine has always been the plan prior to episode 9, Terrio said, well, I can't speak to Kathy's overall intent, but that was certainly discussed and was discussed before I ever came on. Kathy had this overall vision that we had to be telling the same story for 9 episodes. Although from the sleight of hand in episode 7 and episode 8, you wouldn't necessarily know immediately that we were telling the same story. She thought it would be a very strong end for the 9th movie, that it fits well with JJ because he likes magic tricks. That's not necessarily the most compelling argument for a plan. That's all I'm saying on that one. It's not necessarily the most compelling argument that she had something concrete and conclusive and ready to go. She might have said when she was planning out the thing, well, what if Palpatine came back at some point in time in the discussion? But the way that Trevorrow talks about it is that it was a JJ thing. Now, I will get to that, but let's finish up here what he says. He says, when you rewatch the earlier films, things start to make additional sense. Ren and his devotion to the idea of his grandfather, the voice that he's always heard in his head, the certain similarities between Snoke and Palpatine. The intention was that by the time you get to episode 9, you realize that there were real reasons this is all happening. It shows how the story is being fought cyclically throughout the series. Now, I have multiple times argued on camera to you guys that Star Wars is a very cyclical event. Star Wars is always very cyclical. The times are always cyclical. Things kind of happen to repeat. And that is, of course, in my opinion, the prophecy of the chosen one, the light versus the dark, the philosophy, the Buddhist philosophy that kind of runs on the undercurrent of the Jedi Order. And so you have that. Now, this is what Colin Trevorrow had said a month and some change ago when he said Palpatine was not in Colin Trevorrow's version of The Rise of Skywalker. I just want to scroll down to this one here where he says, bringing back the Emperor was an idea JJ brought to the table when he came on board, Trevorrow says. It's honestly something I never considered. I commend him for it. This was a tough story to unlock, and he found the key. Now, what you have to remember about Colin Trevorrow, when he left the project, that was in September of 2017. We were still 3 months away from the release of from The Last Jedi. So they knew that where the movie ended. They knew that it set up nothing. They knew that Luke Skywalker was dead, that Carrie Fisher in real life had passed away a year earlier, and they knew all of these things, but Trevorrow wasn't able to come in and crack the nut for the final movie. And I think the reason why, and this is just my speculation, is that Abrams and Trevorrow are kind of students of Spielberg. They follow that particular Amblin Entertainment path, which is why I think they brought him on board. And I think that ultimately what Trevorrow was doing was following from what JJ had set up. Remember, there was initially a plan that just wasn't followed. And I think that he was trying to follow the plan, whereas Rian Johnson was writing The Last Jedi off of the script of The Force Awakens and not necessarily looking at the rest of the project, which I think is really dumb. And they should have not done that. I do appreciate his attempt to try to do things a bit differently. I still think the movie's bad, but I do appreciate that there was at least an attempt. This was just the wrong time to do it. You do it at the start of a series. You do it at the start of your trilogy, not when you're balls deep in the middle. So you don't do that. However, when you approach it from that perspective of Trevorrow writing his script and working on his story, and he had said in an interview way back then, he goes, I got to tell my story to George Lucas and Luke Skywalker. This, of course, was before the release of The Last Jedi. We didn't know that Luke Skywalker was going to die. So when he says, I got to tell my story to Luke Skywalker, to me, that says, yeah, this is him saying flat out, point blank, I got to tell my story about how Luke Skywalker was going to save the day in the end, or Luke Skywalker was going to be a bigger part of all this. And that's who I got to tell that to Mark Hamill. And I think that's what he tried to do. We know Mark Hamill kind of talked about Jake Skywalker and criticizing Rian Johnson's movie. We know all those things. But when it comes to Palpatine itself, it does very much frame it up to be like this was JJ's idea. And it is possible that by Chris Terrio coming back and trying to correct the record, so to speak, that they said that it was Kathy and that it was Michelle Rejwan that really had the idea for the ending. I just find that hard to believe. I do. I just find that really hard to believe. We've had no, if they were that dedicated to telling that kind of story, The Last Jedi wouldn't exist in the capacity of which it exists. That's my argument for why I don't necessarily believe this. I think Terrio is serving up some cred to Kathy. You know, not that JJ needs it necessarily, but Kathy's kind of had a bit of hard run on her career so far in running Star Wars. So maybe giving her a little bit of good cred's going to go a fair amount of way in order to maybe kind of like get some people far off her back, perhaps. I don't know, or maybe allow her to go out with some kind of good grace that would allow her to leave Lucasfilm and not feel like she's wasted at the time she leaves Lucasfilm 9 years of her life. That part I understand entirely. I think they should be more open and more transparent, even about their shortcomings. And I think that would go a long way with the fan base to make them realize that maybe like to go, look, we had ideas, we had pseudo plan that we wanted to do. It just didn't work out the way that we felt it could do the best. So this is where we find ourselves here. Anyway, just kind of curious your guys' thoughts and your opinions on this one. Let me know down in the comments below. Again, super curious, and talk to you all later. Have yourself a great day. If you made it this far, type Palpatine into the chat so I know, and be sure to join the Discord video for that coming right now. Hey, thank you very much for watching the video. If you want to keep the conversation going, and if you've made it this far, you clearly do, come on in and join the Discord. Link is in the video description. Can't wait to see you there. Have yourself a great day, and peace out.